Hey all, it's Starzy, and today we are going to be doing my December wrap-up. There's not really going to be any rhyme or reason to this because I somehow read 19 things, so it's going to be whatever I pick up is going to be the order we go through it. It's definitely not a case of December wasn't busy, because it definitely was. I guess as soon as holidays start, I just can't stop reading. Let's just jump into it so we're not here all day. I know this actually is one of the first things I read in December because I was still listening to it. I think I started listening to it while I was still at work, and that was Red Wolf by Rachel Vincent. This is, I believe, a YA fantasy that is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, and it's meant to be... Gigi, don't start meowing as soon as I start filming. And it's meant to be a bit of like a feminist take on it. It was kind of forgettable for me, so I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. I think they was like a family of women who are kind of secret protectors of the village, and that's where the wolf thing comes in as well. And it was fine. I think I gave it 3 stars, but yeah, not particularly memorable and not something I like fell in love with. I also listened to It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, which is a romance, and this follows a woman who has a rich stepfather and is a socialite, you know, is in the public eye, all of that kind of stuff, and she goes too far one day and ends up in jail, and so her stepfather cuts her off and sends her off to this little town where she meets a fisherman, a kind of sullen guy who's obviously very different from the life she's used to, and it's their romance. And this is one of those things I read at the start of the month, so I'm trying to remember it now, but like this was cute enough. I did definitely enjoy it. I mean, the burly sullen type isn't really my thing, but it was a cute enough romance otherwise. So, and I'm interested in continuing because it's like one of those it's a romance series where they're like the companion novels. There's one coming out this year now that follows her sister, I believe, so I'll definitely keep reading them. I did enjoy it. I also I've gotten into the habit over the past year of just like not rating majority of the things I read as well, so I can tell you whether I enjoyed it or not, and that's I don't think I have actual ratings for most of these, and if I do, I don't remember them. Some of them have ratings on Goodreads. Another romance I read was Inner Holidays by Christina Lauren. This is obviously a Christmassy romance, but the whole shtick of this one is basically a woman is in love with a family friend, but one drunken night around Christmas, she kisses the brother instead, and then in wishing to be able to kind of redo things or make things better, or no, I think she specifically wishes to find what makes her happy. I think that was what she was saying, and then she ends up in this time loop where she keeps reliving days on this Christmas holiday, and so that's the backdrop of the romance that happens. And this was another one that was fun enough, except a part of me is very hung up on the romance in general and how I can't really support it. I had to really kind of try and distance myself to enjoy what was going on, because the guy she's in a romance with is someone she's grown up with, and it's one thing to have that like friends to lovers romance, or even childhood friends to lovers, but the thing is that they've always been considered family. Like, they're a group of people who come together every Christmas and very much consider themselves family. So when you have someone in your life who you consider family, getting into a romance with them is kind of weird to me. Like, I have family friends that I grew up with, and I do consider them like family, and even if we're not blood related, going anywhere with anyone, like, it would just be weird. And so it's hard for me to get past that point, but it was an okay romance. Otherwise, I know some people aren't going to be as hung up on that as I am, but it's weird to me. Another Christmassy book I read, which I did talk about in my Christmas vlog, was Tinsel by Shabelle Pounder. This is a children's book, It's a children's book, which is like a reimagining of the Christmas story in terms of like Santa and getting gifts around the world and all of that kind of stuff. And it puts the focus on these girls who are involved in it. And it was a cute enough story. Not something I was in love with, but I would definitely recommend it for children. That's obviously the target age. It was fun enough, cute thing to read over Christmas weekend. And it did have some nice themes of like friendship and giving and female empowerment. Another thing I read this month was Space Opera by Catherine M. Valentine. This is possibly kind of the weirdest book I read. We're following, basically these aliens have come to Earth and they've said, you're going to participate in this competition, and if you come last, we're going to destroy your planet because it'll be proof to us that you're not sentient. And the competition they have to participate in is basically Eurovision but wilder. And yeah, it's a very strange one. And it's definitely playing things up for like humor. I was enjoying it to begin with, just because the tone was quite interesting to begin with, but it kind of lost its gimmick after a while, and I got kind of sick of it because it goes off on these kind of tangents. And some of the tangents were really interesting because they like tell you more about the alien species and stuff, but yeah, I think I would give this like three stars. It was ridiculous. I mean, the aliens that come to Earth are like these flamingo type creatures, and the main character who has to participate and create a song kind of has something going with the flamingo alien that visits him. It's very strange. It's a very strange one, but if you're someone who doesn't take things too seriously and really enjoys things that are just kind of silly and over the top, that's kind of what this is. It was something. It was something different, because I don't read a lot of sci-fi in general, let alone something as out of the box as this. I also read Slasher Girls and Monster Boys, which is a collection of short stories, like YA thriller horror stories, and it's got a whole bunch of different authors in it. As can often be the case with these kind of anthologies of different authors, there were kind of hits and misses throughout it. Again, like 3 out of 5 stars overall, because there were some stories I really didn't like and some stories I really did like. My favorite in here, because the whole premise of here is all of the stories have some kind of influence from media, from some form of media, and so my favorite in here, story inspired by Alice in Wonderland. It was dark and weird and twisted, and I really enjoyed it. So that was definitely my favorite story. That was like really good story. But there were some in here I didn't like so much, but it was a fun thing to read overall, just a bunch of these kind of spooky, twisted stories. I also read Sleepless, which is a fantasy graphic novel I'd never heard of, but I saw it at my library and picked it up. And it's kind of very political, and also I think it's considered like a fantasy romance, but in this volume you're kind of building to it. It's not quite there yet. I'm losing my sunlight and it's doing weird things. But you're following this main character who's like a princess whose father's just died, and so there's the ramifications of that, of this new king being installed and some things surrounding that, and she has this sleepless guard, so they literally never sleep, and there's things going on with that. I don't know, it was enjoyable enough. I didn't love it. It's the kind of thing where there was a lot of build-up in this, so it might be more interesting in coming volumes, but again, it was an okay read. I enjoyed it well enough, just didn't like love it. I also read A Very DC Rebirth Holiday, which is a collection of comic book stories in the DC universe. Again, as a collection can go, there were some things I enjoyed and some things I didn't. It's also one of those things where you kind of have to be somewhat familiar with the universe and the characters to appreciate some of these stories, I feel. And while I'm familiar with the majority of the characters, there were a few that I'm not so much in here. My favorite stories are probably definitely the ones that were at the end that There was like a Batman one and a Harley Quinn one. They're all holiday themed. Like there's one where Harley Quinn has to like shrink down and go inside Santa's mind because he's like unconscious or something, and to try to save Christmas. It was a fun little thing to read. Definitely do not regret having read it. This has kind of been a theme in general over 2021 of, I read, what did I read? I think I ended up reading like 94 books or something around there, and I feel like majority of the things I read I have rated 3 stars, or I just felt like, oh yeah, that was good, that was okay about. There weren't many things that I loved or hated, so I guess at least it goes that way. I didn't really have strong feelings either way about majority of the things I read, but fun enough. Next book is one of the only things I've rated below 3 stars this year. I think the other things were a couple of thrillers, but the best thing about this book is the illustrations, because I'll give it that. I love the art style of the illustrations. Like, the illustrations are very cool. This is a book that was probably going to be my last J. Kristoff anyway, just because of all the stuff surrounding him and the tomfoolery that has occurred. But because I did already have this book, I read it, but it has a lot of elements of things that I feel like I should enjoy because it's the story of a man, a vampire essentially, telling his story to a vampire who has him imprisoned. And I like those kind of stories that are non-linear and telling someone's story, and I like vampire media. And there were a few characters that like had potential and were kind of interesting, but I just had too many problems with this to look past. From the very beginning, the first 100 to 200 pages treated women horribly. They were largely like props in the story. There were some characters that came in later that had kind of more agency, but they largely just felt like props at the beginning of the story. We also have the fact, just the writing style in this. I mean, look, I read and loved Nevernight. I know that has a kind of pretentious writing style, but I enjoyed it in Nevernight. But I feel like he's kind of kicked it up a notch even more in this, and that's not necessarily a good thing. We also had really repetitive phrases, like "as you like it" was said so much throughout this book, and it also has like a vaguely French setting, and so occasionally characters would throw in a word like "oui" that just felt more off-putting than anything else, which it kind of felt like that thing of trying to take inspiration from another country, but not really looking into it, or just, I don't know, just using little bits and pieces. Like, the only reason that it stuck out as like French inspired was the language and the names, and the language being, again, just a few words chucked in here or there. And like, the story got kind of interesting by the end, but too many problems to ignore, basically. From the writing style, to the wording, to the fact that there was just so much swearing and sex in this book that basically just seemed to be like for the sake of it, not to actually add anything to the story or characterization. Basically, probably many more things. I had many issues with this. I only ended up finishing it because I got an audiobook and up to the speed. And as I said, the story did get interesting by the end to some respects, but there were still problems that were popping up. So a somewhat interesting story doesn't excuse everything else that was going on that I was not okay with, basically. One of my only 2 stars for the year. And now I can never read a book from this author again. On a more positive note, I read the first volume of Cardcaptor Sakura, which I watched Cardcaptor Sakura the anime as a kid. It was one of the shows I watched a lot of, along with like Sailor Moon and Pokemon. And so this was very nostalgic to go back to, and I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it 4 out of 5. You know, you got your cute art, the nostalgia of having watched the anime. and you're basically following this this girl who opens up a box and a bunch of clow cards come out, and they're kind of imbued with their own power and personality, and so now she has to go around and capture them all so they're not running amok throughout the world. And she also has cute costumes every time she goes and does this because her best friend makes her costumes. So it was very cute and fun, and I would definitely be interested in reading more of these because they're cute and they're nostalgia. Speaking of the anime nostalgia, I did read volumes 3 to 6 of Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon is definitely the anime I watched the most of as a kid and have watched plenty of as an adult too at this point. I've always been very into Sailor Moon. I'm wearing a Sailor Moon necklace right now. But yeah, so again, nostalgia. And I kind of binge read 4 of these in one day because I really wanted to read them before Christmas so that I could return them to my little sibling, because they belonged to my little sibling. As much as I love Sailor Moon, I did have some problems with this. Mostly because these volumes introduced Chibi Moon, the little Usagi, who is the daughter of future Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask. And the problem I have with this whole storyline is mostly to do with it's presented in a very weird, uncomfortable way in terms of the fact Usagi gets jealous of what is essentially her own child and her relationship with Tuxedo Mask. I can't remember his name because I'm used to, like when I was a kid watching the dub, I think he was called Darien, but is it Mamoru? But there's this whole jealousy thing going on, and then there's also the fact that Dark Lady, who is her grown up, then like kisses her father and says that she wants him. So that whole thing is very weird and uncomfortable. So I don't love that. So I think I gave those volumes where all of that was going on like a 3 stars, but then we were bumped it back up by volume 6 because volume 6 is where Sailor, Uranus and Neptune are introduced, and we love the cute gay couple. And when they're introduced, it's also kind of highlights again how kind of bi Sailor Moon really is. But yeah, so I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed visiting these, as much as there's some plot points that are uncomfortable and I don't like. Overall, it's been nostalgic. I've enjoyed it. Cute magical girl series. I probably prefer the anime more just because, I don't know, it's also, the manga I found moves so much faster than the 90s anime, and sometimes I feel like it moves through things too quickly, and I also feel like the manga doesn't characterize the characters, like it doesn't show the personalities of the characters as much. They seem much more flat in the manga because they're not given that room a lot of the time, and it doesn't have as much of like the humor that the anime has, but I have still been enjoying going through it nonetheless. I also listened to Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is non-fiction. This is about forming small habits basically to improve your life in various ways. Honestly, not sure how much even stuck with me at this point. It was something I was like listening to on the way to work. I also I remember that some of the stuff was presented wasn't really sitting well with me, but I can't remember exactly what it was. And I don't know whether that's also because I'm sitting with a brain that is probably not neurotypical, so sometimes the way some things are presented of like, you should do this to improve your life, doesn't work with me. But it's not one that like I wouldn't recommend. I just have been really busy in December and I've read a lot of things, and so I'm having difficulty specifically remembering specific points from things, and this is the kind of thing where you'd want to. I think the problem with something like this is it would be much more helpful for me to have like a physical copy and mark it up as I went through it, that I did find relevant to me. I think listening to it as an audiobook is good from the perspective of, I often like listening to things that are read by the author, and and it's a good way to kind of get your head into some ideas, but I would definitely have to revisit things when I do that. But it was the thing I read. I also read Critical Role Vox Machina Origins, which is a graphic novel based on the first campaign of Critical Role, which are a group of voice actors who play Dungeons and Dragons. They do live shows. They're on campaign 3 now, which I've been really enjoying. I didn't ever watch campaign 1 because I didn't get into it until campaign 2, but I really enjoyed this. The art was really beautiful and the characters were great, which I would expect from characters these people have created, and the story was interesting enough and all of that kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed that. So whether or not you've ever been exposed to Critical Role, I think it's still something like anyone could pick up. I mean, I don't know anything about that campaign and I still really enjoyed it. So it was a fun, humorous fantasy comic book graphic novel. I also read an arc of Unmasking Autism by Devon Price. I think this is released in March, I want to say. Again, I've read an arc of it, so it's not out yet. But this is a book that is looking at autism and masking. The author is autistic himself, and I think it was a valuable resource. Again, one of those things I would probably want to get a physical copy of and highlight and tab, etc., etc. If that's anywhere relevant or interesting to you, I would recommend it when it comes out. It was also really good in terms of the fact it had a good mix of like personal accounts and research. We love a good long bibliography in the back listing all the references. I also read House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland, which is a YA horror. And in this, we are following this group of sisters. There are 3 sisters who disappeared when they were young, and when they came back, they were different. Like, they had dark eyes and their hair grew white, and there's something kind of weird and magical about them. And so it's kind of a story of them finding out more about themselves and their history, while there is also kind of something or someone hunting them. And I really enjoyed this. I gave 4 out of 5 stars. It had some like both beautiful and creepy imagery of things of like plants growing out of bodies and up throats and stuff like that. And the way it went, didn't surprise me. I kind of expected it to an extent, but with this type of story, like, it's not a thriller, it's a horror. So in that respect, I don't think it matters if you do guess what's going on, because horror is really more about the atmosphere and the feeling it gives you. Can I help you? What? And yeah, this was creepy and haunting and kind of disturbing in some ways. Yeah, I really liked this. I have found that YA horror is a genre I've been really enjoying getting into since last year. I've definitely found some winners, and I did enjoy this. Well, I don't know whether it's necessarily like an absolute favorite at this point. I don't know. It's one of the last books I read in December, so I haven't really sat with it long enough either, but I did enjoy it. And then probably my favorite thing that I read in December, honestly one of my favorite things I read all year, and I wasn't really expecting it. The Wolf of Arenaro by K.S. Villiso. This is an adult fantasy, and it's also one I would recommend for readers of YA who want to get into more adult, because it has some kind of similar things going on in it, in terms of it has a badass female main character, it has kind of the hints of romantic tension and some things like that. But we are following a queen. We're following the Bitch Queen, because I think this series is called The Bitch Queen Chronicles. And basically she has a husband who she hasn't seen for I think 5 years because he left, and he has asked for a meeting, so she goes to this other land to meet with him, and things start going very badly. People try to kill her, people capture her, a lot of stuff goes on. But yeah, I really enjoyed this overall. I found it really engaging the whole way through, and while the characters aren't always necessarily overly likable, she is pretty brutal in the way she attacks and kills some people throughout this book. But it was really interesting kind of getting to know her and getting to know her history, because there are like some flashbacks throughout here, and you eventually near the end get to know like why her husband left in the first place, and all of these different pieces come together. And I really enjoyed it, and I felt it really well done. Liked the pacing, liked the action, found the things going on interesting, found the characters interesting even when they weren't likable, and I definitely want to continue this series because yeah, this was a good time. I feel like I don't pick up adult fantasy as much as I need to, and I feel like I often don't feel motivated to. Like this year I mostly just like I felt the most motivated to pick up like horror and romance, and I think it's also because they feel like they're going to be easier reads, and so maybe that's why my head goes like that. And so I don't pick up adult fantasy as much because I think there's like that barrier of thinking it's going to be harder to digest, which this wasn't also a thing as this. With this, you're only following one character, and the writing isn't too over the top or anything, so that's also why I would recommend it as like a beginner fantasy in that way, because it's not like confusing or convoluted as the way some big adult fantasy series can be, as much as we enjoy them. But yeah, I feel like I definitely need to be reading more adult fantasy because I don't read it enough, and often when I do, I find books I really love, because I think the other adult fantasy I read, I don't think I read many in 2021 at all, but I read Rage of Dragons and at the start of the year and really enjoyed that as well. So I need to read more. If you have fantasy recommendations, give them to me. As much as I need to stop starting series because I'm in the middle of so many right now, but no, I really enjoyed this. It was a good time. One of my favorites of the year, so. Alright, that is everything that I read in December. I usually go through the things I watch in my wrap-up as well, but we do not want to be here all day. I don't know whether I particularly watched anything that exciting regardless, other than the new Spider-Man movie, which is one of the only Marvel movies I've ever come out of not wanting to rant about. I actually thoroughly enjoyed that, and as someone who has watched all of the Spider-Man movies that, you know, prior to the MCU, it really hit that geeky nostalgia. Yeah, that is going to be it from me today. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Let me know something that you really enjoyed in December, or give me a adult fantasy recommendation. But yeah, that's going to be it from me. I have a lot of things I need to work on at the moment in terms of videos. There's lots of things I have planned that I need to get to, so there'll definitely be more content from me coming here and there. But otherwise, stay safe, stay educated, and Starzy out.